We stick with the trade theme. The trade representative for the United States says the Trans-Pacific Partnership could be completed by the end of this year. Michael Froman spoke at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington on Tuesday. Talks wrapped up recently between the 12 nations in a partnership that would account for 40% of the world's economy.
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. It's an incredibly complex negotiation. We now have 12 countries. We have 29 chapters because we're negotiating new disciplines and higher standards than we've had and any of us have had in our previous agreements. It's a challenge for everybody, but I feel good that we've got the momentum and there's a real focus on getting it done.
He said talks on another trade deal, the one between the U.S. and the EU, will start in October. He says the biggest stumbling block could be on eliminating unnecessary regulatory issues. Now, we're going to have much more on this. Maricruz Magowan is the Vice President of National Economists Club here in Washington, D.C. She joins me. We got a lot of trade deals going on. Let me start with the one we mentioned earlier, which was China, Japan, and South Korea. That's a three-way deal. It's less than the 12-way. So my sense is maybe it's easier to get done, but maybe you might have something to say about that. Will that be easy to get completed?
Not only easy, I think it's necessary for them to have that. China is not part of the TPP, is not part of the TTIP either. However, it's a very strong economic force in the world, as everybody knows. It is on their behalf to start some trade agreement where they are going to have more power to negotiate, and also having Japan and South Korea, in spite of the territorial disputes that they are having at the moment, but they have other common grounds, and in the way they manage their economic policies, they are more homogeneous. So they have a lot to benefit from if they do it.
For Japan and South Korea, and I mean, obviously China is the big elephant in that room, what do they stand to gain? What does each country get by signing a free trade agreement between the three?
What everybody wants to get, to keep having economic growth, great international, investment possibilities, flexibilities of having that, and also having good, very low unemployment rates. Basically, that's what everybody wants from trade.
I mean, we'll get to the 12-nation deal, but does Southeast Asia probably feel a little left out in that deal?
Probably. I was also very surprised that they didn't be part of the TPP at the beginning. I really couldn't understand why was that, because it benefited everybody. There are some trust issues, as you mentioned before. There is also some strong disagreement with certain things like institutional, controls in every country, like intellectual property issues, currency issues. Well, I think that prevented them.
I'm going to throw out the elephant in the room because the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was partially initiated by the United States.
Yes.
China was left out. The China deal between China, Japan, and South Korea was partially initiated by China, obviously. Yes. The U.S. has been obviously left out. We've got two trade deals that, I don't want to say they compete, but can we avoid having them compete with each other and make them more complementary?
If they are smart, they are going to complement it. If they are smart, I think everybody wants to have consistent, sustainable economic growth. And from that point of view, it's in nobody's behalf to start competing.
So the 12-nation deal, what makes that different for the other countries involved? Because obviously you still have Japan and South Korea.
I think the TPP, for example, compared to the TTIP, is going to be harder to implement. Why? Because those countries have different ways of doing business. It's going to be harder. I think they are being very optimistic, saying that they are going to end it very soon. I don't think so. I think it's going to take longer than that. Once they go into the details and once they go into signing and promising to do this or that into the specifics, I don't think it's going to go as easy. On the other hand, if you compare the three nations like China, Japan, and South Korea, that is going to go easier, I think, from my point of view, than the TTP, because they have
that's a
things
huge
in common.
That's 20% of the world's manufacturing output, essentially, maybe even a greater number than that. For South Korea and Japan, they're trying to get their economies stimulated as well. So all three economies have the same exact goal, but they still have significant tariffs on imports and exports. How are they going to overcome that?
It is the moment they realize that it goes beyond the tariffs, it really goes into their policies. It goes into their regulations. That's where they have the disagreements, where they go into what they call the side agreements. When you talk about the environment, when you talk about labor, when you talk about health, the other countries want to make sure you are going to have some respect. Some countries have regulations about that. The other countries don't have regulations about that. So the ones with the regulations have a lot to lose if they get into trade. So that's why it's so difficult, because nobody wants to go into in a
If
position
that deal
that they are
gets
at
done,
disadvantage.
if that deal gets done between China and South Korea and Japan, is U.S. the loser?
I don't think so, because the U.S. has the TTIP with
It's a separate,
Europe.
it's a separate
It's separate,
deal.
but they can compensate with that, and they have the TPP. So I don't think it's going to be a loser. I think they missed an opportunity, but they can compensate with the other two large trade agreements that they're getting involved with.
Maricruz, Magowan, always good to have you here, Vice President of the National Economists Club.
Thank you,
We
Phil.
will see you again, of course.